Hello everyone and welcome to another video. Now, if you watched the one before last, then you'll know that my Vega 64 is no more. It had been having problems for a while, black screen related, and I decided it was finally time to get rid of it and purchase myself a personal upgrade. Now, I left that up to you guys to decide. In the last video I said I would go with the card that was the most upvoted in the comments, and it ended up being a choice between a 1080 Ti or a 5700 XT. I decided then that I would give AMD another chance and go with a 5700 XT. Now, those of you who have been here for longer than a few months may remember that I purchased a standard 5700, a reference design one, and I discovered that it had a few issues, especially when it came to 1080p gaming, where it would just black screen or I would get a no signal error. I wasn't just the only one experiencing this, and so going into this 5700 XT purchase had me a little nervous. I was in two minds about proceeding. When I found this Gigabyte OC model though, well, I just couldn't resist and I decided to go for it anyway. My mind was put ever so slightly more at ease when I discovered that this was the Gamers Nexus best overall 5700 XT as detailed in their 5700 XT best and worst video. With that in mind, I thought, well, this sounds like it's going to be a pretty good purchase. And so here we have my new 5700 XT from AMD. Installing the card first of all, and once again I was presented with a minor issue regarding the sound. When I first installed the drivers, I had this crackling sound that would play in the background of videos, or even when I just wanted to adjust the volume in Windows, I would get this noise. You know, and no one wants that when they're trying to watch videos, play games, or do anything else. This was resolved by switching from HDMI to display ports, but I also noticed that I was still getting problems when it came to running some games in 1080p. This was an identical occurrence with the standard 5700 that I tested a few months ago, though it wasn't happening as often, so that can only be a good thing. For example, Metro Exodus still ran fine at 1080p, but other games like Battlefield 5 or Assassin's Creed Odyssey gave me this issue, and the only way to resolve it was, well, by playing at 1440p or 4K, something, thankfully, that I'll be doing more of when it comes to playing my personal games collection. But this is still a problem should I want to play at full HD resolution rather than anything higher. You know, it's clear that I'm not the only one still experiencing issues with these drivers. I really want to like this card. I do plan on keeping it because I know that these problems will be resolved, hopefully sooner rather than later. And I wanted to go with AMD because usually when it comes to my personal rigs, I always end up with an Nvidia card, but I'm going to stick with it. I haven't really tested it beyond a couple of games, and we're going to be jumping into that in a minute because I need to check out the stability, the temperatures, the noise levels, things like that. But before we do so, let's take a quick look at the outside of the card. We have the 3 fans set up here. It's a very subtle design. Some people would say it was plain or ugly, but I quite like the all black style of this card with the little light up Gigabyte logo. You guys know I've never really been one for fancy lighting or RGB, but the subtlety of this is really something that's quite pleasing to look at, I feel. The card requires one 8-pin and one 6-pin connector, just like the standard 5700, and in operation, when it's just there idle, the fans will switch off, so it's completely silent. And to be honest, it remains very quiet, even in gaming situations. But more on that as we jump into the titles, so let's get into that now. So this is actually a brand new card. It had about £60 knocked off of it from 359 to 300, simply because the box had a dent in the top right hand corner, and that was all. It just puts people off when the packaging is damaged, apparently. So I started with the optional 21.4 driver and then rolled back to the 21.3 driver to see if the issues were resolved regarding HDMI, but unfortunately they still remain. Despite this, I do think a lot of other issues have been ironed out as reported by the community, though we're still a little off flawless, at least from what I can tell. I do find Nvidia GPU drivers less headache inducing, to be honest, but I love what AMD have been doing recently in terms of hardware. They just need solid drivers to back it up. I also really like what AMD have done with their Radeon software. It used to be that I found GeForce Experience a little better, but this software overhaul is a welcome one as far as I'm concerned, and it seems to work a lot better now as well. I've always been a fan of the Relive Capture feature, and with a little tweaking, it can even be enabled on APUs, though how smoothly it will capture footage is anyone's guess. As far as acoustics and thermals go, the card idles at 48 degrees with the fans off, and I noticed the temperatures hit 70 during my Metro Exodus gameplay, which meant the fans ramped up to 40% speed and remained very quiet. The temperature seems to sit at 68 most of the time. I've still got it paired with the Ryzen 5 1600AF at the moment, and honestly the two go quite well together, with 60 FPS at 1440p or 30 FPS at 4K being easily achievable by this combination. There was one case of very noticeable stutter in Battlefield 5, which is also a game that suffers from 1080p issues, and it wasn't the CPU causing the problem, so that was an odd occurrence in an otherwise decent all-round gameplay session. I just want to say how relieved I am that I'm finally away from the constant black screens of the Vega 64, which, yeah, was an interesting card, but it certainly wasn't without its faults. It's certainly one I will remember, and maybe in another couple of years we'll check out its modern day performance, because I have a feeling it's going to be a very good card for quite a long time, just like the 1080 for example, which I've also owned that wasn't without its problems. I had the Gigabyte one. Actually the Vega 64 was Gigabyte as well. And now I've gone with a Gigabyte 5700 XT. Probably not the best decision, but this seems like a pretty good card so far, and it's very well reviewed, so hopefully my decision pays off here. Okay, so a little while later, and as a little add-on here, I discovered that 1080p will work in borderless mode, or if you start the game with a DisplayPort cable, then switch to HDMI after changing the resolution. Weird. I also heard a few negative things about older games running with issues, but every pre-DX11 game I tested ran fine, which was a relief, considering most of my favourites run on DX9 or lower. This card is here to stay. I'm not going to give up on it this time like I did with the original 5700. I should have waited for a few driver updates to come out. That was a pretty fun card to mess around with. Like I said before, we flashed that to a 5700 XT using a different BIOS, and we saw a nice performance gain, though it certainly meant that the thermals and the acoustics went right downhill. That made it so incredibly noisy, and I ended up selling that one on to what I'm sure was a very happy new owner after telling him about all the adventures we went on. Yeah, the 5700 is also still a very nice card indeed. Probably has similar issues to this one, I would imagine. Maybe it's just me, I really don't know. Maybe it's the display I'm using. I don't want to rule that out. That's always a possibility, but for 1080p gaming it seems like I was able to resolve the issues by switching cables after changing resolution, or just playing in borderless mode. I'll have to mess around with some older drivers as well to see if we can eliminate the issue entirely. It's not ideal. Everyone wants to be on the latest drivers, you know, you get the best support for the latest games, but if we have to roll back just to get stable performance at Full HD 1920 by 1080 resolution, then that may be something I'm going to have to consider. But I hope you've all enjoyed this video. The 5700 XT is the new personal GPU, and it will be interesting to see just how long it holds up for. Probably a good few years yet. The Ryzen 5 1600AF, on the other hand, that I've currently got it paired with, well, that might change, but I'm tempted to keep that in the system for as long as possible as well, just to see how well that holds up, because at higher resolutions, such as 1440p or 4K, it has no issue with this card. In fact, it's still a very nice 6-core 12-threaded chip, much like the original Ryzen 5 1600 that launched a couple of years ago. With all that said, well, thank you very much for watching. I know this was hardly a budget-focused video, but I like to keep you guys informed. You seem to like it when I keep you updated with my personal PC endeavours. as well, my personal computer endeavours. So yeah, I just thought I'd let you know what was happening, what card I went for. This was the card most voted for in terms of thumbs up by you, either this or a 1080 Ti, and who knows, maybe a 1080 Ti will be a card that we test in the not so distant future to see how well that's holding up. Though I have a feeling it's going to be pretty good if I'm completely honest. But thank you very much. Leave a like on this video if you enjoyed it, leave a dislike if you didn't, subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already, and hopefully I'll see all of you in the next one.